I woke up from knee surgery to find my entire driveway buried under 3 feet of industrial gravel, and the worst part was that I couldn't even walk to see the damage myself. My wife Teresa had to wheel me to the front window in my wheelchair, and when I saw what they'd done to our property, I felt my blood pressure spike so high I thought I'd need another hospital visit. "Those absolute lunatics," I muttered, gripping the armrests of my wheelchair. "Teresa, tell me I'm hallucinating from the pain medication." Teresa Davis stood beside me, her phone already out and recording video of the disaster. "You're not hallucinating, Keith. The HOA really did this. Your beautiful Belgian block driveway is completely buried." I'd lived in this Scottsdale, Arizona neighborhood called Desert Palms Estates for 8 years, and for most of that time, the HOA had been relatively reasonable. Sure, they sent the occasional notice about trash cans being visible from the street or reminding us about approved paint colors, but nothing too insane. That all changed 6 months ago when Patricia Cunningham took over as HOA president after our previous president moved to Florida. Patricia was everything you'd imagine when you heard the word Karen times 10. Mid-50s, bleached blonde hair cut in that distinctive angular bob, always wearing white capri pants and bedazzled sunglasses, even indoors. She drove a white Mercedes SUV with a Live, Laugh, Love sticker on the back and had made it her personal mission to turn our quiet neighborhood into her vision of suburban perfection. The trouble started 3 months ago when I'd replaced my old cracked asphalt driveway with beautiful Belgian block pavers. I'd gotten approval from the Architectural Review Committee, submitted all the proper paperwork, used an approved contractor, and everything was done by the book. The driveway cost me nearly $30,000, but it looked amazing and increased our property value significantly. Patricia hated it immediately. She claimed the darker color of the pavers didn't match the aesthetic vision of the neighborhood, even though half the houses on our street had similar driveways. She started showing up at our house unannounced, standing in our yard with her clipboard, taking photos and muttering about violations and standards. "This needs to be addressed," she'd said during her last visit 2 weeks before my surgery. "The HOA board has decided that all driveways must be uniform. We're implementing a new standard." I told her exactly where she could file her new standards, which probably wasn't the smartest move in retrospect. Now, sitting in my wheelchair and staring at the disaster in front of me, I understood this was retaliation. Patricia had waited until I was completely vulnerable, recovering from major knee surgery, unable to physically stop her. And then, she'd struck. "Check the cameras," I told Teresa. "Please tell me the security system caught everything." I'd installed a comprehensive security camera system 2 years ago after a string of package thefts in the neighborhood. 6 cameras covered every angle of our property, all recording in high definition with audio, uploading everything to cloud storage. I'd spent about $3,000 on the system, and it was about to pay for itself 1,000 times over. Teresa pulled up the camera app on her phone while I continued staring at the gravel mountain that used to be our driveway. The industrial gravel they'd used wasn't even the decorative kind. It was rough, ugly crushed stone, the type you'd use for a construction site base, not a residential driveway. It completely covered the Belgian blocks and extended about 6 inches onto our lawn on both sides. "Got it," Teresa said, her eyes widening as she watched the footage. "Keith, you need to see this. It's all here." She brought the phone over, and I watched the footage from yesterday afternoon. At exactly 2:15, a large dump truck pulled up in front of our house, followed by Patricia's white Mercedes. The truck had Desert Landscape Supply written on the side. Patricia got out of her car, clipboard in hand, and directed the truck driver to our driveway. The camera angle was perfect. You could see everything, hear everything. Patricia's voice came through crystal clear on the audio. "Right here," she said, gesturing to our driveway. "I want the entire surface covered, at least 3 feet deep. Make it impossible to use." The truck driver, a younger guy probably in his 20s, looked uncertain. "Madam, are you sure? This is someone's private property. Don't you need the homeowner's permission?" "I am the HOA president," Patricia snapped. "I have full authority to enforce compliance with neighborhood standards. This driveway is in violation of our regulations. The homeowner was warned repeatedly and refused to comply. This is a sanctioned HOA action." "If you say so," the driver said, still sounding doubtful. "But I'm going to need you to sign this work order confirming you're authorizing this." The camera caught Patricia signing the paperwork. Then, for the next 40 minutes, the footage showed the dump truck making 3 separate trips, each time dumping massive loads of gravel onto our driveway. Patricia stood there the entire time, supervising, looking absolutely delighted with herself. When they finished, she walked up to our front door and stuck a notice on it. The camera showed her smiling as she did it. Then she got in her Mercedes and drove away. "That notice is still on the door," Teresa said. "Want me to get it?" "Yes, and save it. Don't let it get damaged." Teresa went to retrieve the notice while I rewound the footage and watched it again, making sure I had all the details memorized. The dump truck had made 3 trips, which meant they'd gone back to get more gravel specifically to bury our driveway. This wasn't a simple mistake or misunderstanding. This was deliberate destruction of private property. Teresa came back with the notice. It was printed on official Desert Palms Estates, HOA letterhead. "Notice of Non-Compliance Remediation," I read aloud. "Dear Mr. Kenneth Kramer, your property has been found in continued violation of HOA CC&R Section 4.7 regarding driveway materials and appearance. After multiple warnings, the HOA has taken corrective action to bring your property into compliance. The cost of remediation will be added to your HOA account. You have 30 days to install an approved driveway surface. Failure to comply will result in additional fines of $500 per day. Sincerely, Patricia Cunningham, HOA President." "Section 4.7, Teresa said, pulling out her phone again. "Let me look that up in our CC&Rs. The CC&Rs, or covenants, conditions, and restrictions, were the rules governing our neighborhood. Every homeowner received a copy when they bought their house. I had mine in my office, but Teresa could access it online through the HOA's resident portal." "Found it," she said after a minute. "Section 4.7 states that all driveways must be constructed of concrete, asphalt, or paving stones approved by the Architectural Review Committee. Materials must be maintained in good condition and free from excessive cracking or deterioration." She looked up at me. "Keith, Belgian block pavers are paving stones. You got approval from the Architectural Committee. You have the approval letter in your files." "I know," I said, my jaw clenching. "This isn't about violations. This is personal. Patricia wants me to tear out a $30,000 driveway and replace it with something she likes better, and she's using her position to force me to do it. What do we do?" I thought about it. My knee was throbbing, reminding me that I was supposed to be resting and recovering, not dealing with HOA drama. My surgeon had told me to stay off the knee as much as possible for the next 6 weeks. I was supposed to be focused on physical therapy and healing, not fighting with a power-drunk HOA president. But I couldn't let this stand. If I did nothing, Patricia would think she could get away with anything. And what about the cost? The notice said they were billing me for this remediation. Dumping that much gravel wasn't cheap, probably several $1,000s, and then I'd have to pay to have it removed and my driveway cleaned. "We need a lawyer," I said. "A good one. Someone who specializes in HOA disputes." "I'll start making calls," Teresa said. "What about reporting this to the police? She destroyed our property." "Yes, that too. But photograph everything first, every angle. Get measurements if you can. Document all of it." Teresa spent the next hour documenting the damage while I sent the camera footage to myself via email and downloaded it to multiple backup drives. I wasn't taking any chances with this evidence disappearing. I also called my insurance company to report the property damage, though I suspected they'd tell me this was an HOA issue, not an insurance claim. I was right. The insurance representative was sympathetic, but explained that disputes with HOAs typically fell outside their coverage unless there was clear vandalism by a third party. Since Patricia had left an official notice claiming this was an HOA action, it was a civil matter, not a criminal one. "That's insane," I told Teresa after I hung up. "She can't just bury someone's driveway and call it an HOA action to avoid consequences." "Apparently she thinks she can," Teresa said. She'd been taking photos and had measured the gravel pile. I counted it out. At the deepest point, there's about 40 inches of gravel. The pile weighs tons, literally. Getting this removed is going to be a nightmare. I called the Scottsdale Police Department non-emergency line and explained the situation. The dispatcher took my information and said she'd send an officer out to take a report. Officer Martinez arrived about 30 minutes later. He was in his mid-30s, professional and polite. I showed him the damage, the notice from Patricia, and most importantly, the security camera footage. He watched the entire video, his expression growing more concerned as it played out. "Mr. Kramer, this is definitely not a normal HOA action," he said. "In my experience, HOAs can fine you. They can take you to court for violations, but they can't come onto your property and dump 3 tons of gravel on your driveway without your consent, even if they claim it's for compliance purposes." "Ooh, so this is criminal?" I asked hopefully. "It's definitely property damage," Officer Martinez said. "The question is whether it's criminal mischief or if it falls under civil dispute. Given that she's claiming HOA authority, a prosecutor might say this needs to be settled in civil court. But I'll file a report, and you'll have a case number. That should help if you pursue legal action." He took detailed notes, photographed everything, and took a copy of the HOA notice. Before he left, he gave me some advice. "Mr. Kramer, I've seen a lot of HOA disputes over the years. They can get ugly. Document everything, every communication, every interaction. Get a lawyer who knows Arizona HOA law. And whatever you do, don't retaliate or do anything that could make you look bad if this ends up in court." "I'm in a wheelchair recovering from surgery," I said. "I couldn't retaliate if I wanted to." Officer Martinez smiled sympathetically. "Just keep that camera system running. Something tells me this isn't over." He was right about that. Teresa had been making calls while Officer Martinez was there, and she'd found us a lawyer. His name was Robert Fitzgerald, and he specialized in HOA disputes. He had a consultation slot available the next day if we wanted it. "Book it," I told her. That evening I tried to rest, but I kept looking out the window at the gravel mountain in our driveway. Our neighbors had started noticing. A few had come over to ask what happened. Word was spreading through the neighborhood fast. My next-door neighbor Marcus knocked on our door around 7. "Keith, man, what happened to your driveway?" he asked when Teresa let him in. I explained the situation, showed him the footage. Marcus had lived in Desert Palms Estates for 12 years, longer than anyone else on our street. "Patricia's completely out of control," he said, shaking his head. "She's been targeting anyone who doesn't bow down to her. Last month, she threatened the Johnsons with fines because their rose bushes were 6 inches taller than the recommended height. Mrs. Johnson is 83 years old and has been growing those roses for a decade." "Why hasn't anyone stopped her?" I asked. "Because most people just comply rather than fight," Marcus said. "She fined the Petersons $1,500 for parking their RV in their driveway for 3 days while they were loading it for a trip. They paid rather than deal with the hassle. She's been racking up fine money for the HOA, like crazy." "Where's that money going?" Teresa asked. Marcus shrugged. "Good question. The HOA financial reports have been vague lately. Patricia keeps saying we need to build up reserves, but our fees went up 20% this year, and I haven't seen any major improvements or maintenance that would justify it." That was interesting. Very interesting. "Marcus, do you think other homeowners would support me if I challenge her?" I asked. "Absolutely," Marcus said without hesitation. "People are scared of her, but they're also sick of her behavior. If someone stood up to her and won, I think you'd have a lot of support." After Marcus left, I thought about that. This wasn't just about my driveway anymore. Patricia was abusing her authority, and if the financial reports were as vague as Marcus suggested, there might be even bigger issues. The next morning, Teresa drove me to Robert Fitzgerald's law office in downtown Scottsdale. It was in a modern building near Old Town, and his office was on the 3rd floor. Teresa helped me navigate with my wheelchair, and we were shown into a conference room where Robert was waiting. Robert Fitzgerald was probably in his late 40s, fit and professional looking, with graying hair and sharp eyes. His office walls were covered with framed legal certifications and what looked like thank you letters from clients. "Mr. Kramer, Mrs. Davis," he said, shaking our hands. "I've reviewed the information you sent over, and I have to say, in 15 years of practicing HOA law, I've never seen anything quite this blatant." He pulled up the camera footage on his laptop and watched it again. This is gold," he said. "She admits on camera that this is retaliation for non-compliance. She directs the destruction of your property, and she signs documentation authorizing it. Mr. Kramer, you have an exceptionally strong case." What are our options? I asked. Several, Robert said, leaning back in his chair. First, we can file an emergency injunction to prevent the HOA from taking any further action against your property. Second, we file a lawsuit for property damage, harassment, and abuse of authority. Third, we can request a full audit of the HOA's finances and governance. An audit? Teresa said. Why? Because in my experience, when HOA board members abuse their authority this flagrantly, there are usually other issues lurking beneath the surface. Your neighbor mentioned that fees went up significantly and financial reports have been vague. That raises red flags. Arizona law requires HOAs to maintain transparent financial records accessible to all homeowners. If Patricia is using her position to enrich herself or misuse HOA funds, that's a much bigger problem. How much is this going to cost? I asked. I had some savings, but legal fees could drain that quickly. I work on contingency for HOA cases where there's clear wrongdoing, Robert said. I take 30% of any damages awarded. Given the strength of your evidence, I'm confident we'll win. I'm also confident we can get your attorney fees paid by the HOA, which is standard in Arizona when homeowners successfully challenge HOA overreach. So we're doing this? Teresa asked me. We're doing this, I confirmed. Robert smiled. Good. Let's make Patricia Cunningham regret the day she decided to bury your driveway. We spent the next 2 hours going over every detail. Robert had me sign a representation agreement, and he immediately began drafting the paperwork for an emergency injunction. He wanted to file it that afternoon. The goal is to freeze any HOA action against you while we investigate and prepare the full lawsuit, he explained. We'll also demand that the HOA remove the gravel from your property at their expense immediately. Will they actually do it? I asked. If they're smart, yes. If Patricia is as stubborn as she seems, she might refuse, which only makes our case stronger. Robert filed the emergency injunction that afternoon. By law, the HOA had to be notified immediately, and a hearing was scheduled for 5 days later. In the meantime, the HOA was prohibited from taking any further action regarding our property. That didn't stop Patricia from trying. 2 days later, I was doing physical therapy exercises in the living room when Teresa called out from the kitchen. Keith, Patricia's here. She's standing in our yard. I wheeled myself to the window. Sure enough, Patricia was standing at the edge of the gravel pile, clipboard in hand, taking photos. She was wearing her typical outfit, white capris, a pink polo shirt, and enormous sunglasses despite the overcast day. She's violating the injunction, I said. Get video. Teresa grabbed her phone and started recording from the window. I pulled up the security camera app on my tablet and made sure all angles were capturing this. Patricia walked around the gravel pile, taking photos from different angles. Then she did something that made my blood boil. She walked up to our front door and stuck another notice on it. That's it, I said. Call Robert. Tell him what's happening. Teresa called while Patricia finished whatever she was doing and walked back to her Mercedes. She paused before getting in, looked directly at our front window where I was sitting, and waved. Actually waved, like this was all a fun game to her. Robert called back within minutes. Don't touch the notice. I'm sending someone over to photograph it in place and collect it as evidence. Patricia just violated a court order. This is going to cost her. A paralegal from Robert's office arrived 30 minutes later. He photographed the notice from multiple angles, then carefully removed it and placed it in a protective sleeve. The notice was even more outrageous than the first one. Second notice of non-compliance, it read. Your property remains in violation. You have failed to begin approved remediation. Additional fines of $500 per day begin immediately. Furthermore, the HOA is placing a lien on your property for $7,200, representing the cost of initial remediation plus accrued fines. $7,000? Teresa said, reading over my shoulder. For dumping gravel on our driveway? She's making up numbers, I said. There's no way that gravel costs $7,000. Robert confirmed this when we forwarded him the notice. She's fabricating costs and finding you in violation of a court order. This is going to look terrible for her at the hearing. The hearing came faster than I expected. Robert filed an expedited motion, and the judge agreed to see us within a week of the injunction being filed. The hearing was held at the Maricopa County Superior Court. Teresa had to help me navigate the courthouse in my wheelchair, but we made it to the courtroom with time to spare. Patricia was there with the HOA's attorney, a nervous-looking younger man named David Chen. Patricia was dressed professionally for once, in a navy suit, but she still had that smug expression that made me want to throw something. Judge Rebecca Morrison presided. She was in her early 60s with a no-nonsense demeanor that became immediately apparent when she started the hearing. "Let me make sure I understand the facts," Judge Morrison said, looking at the case file. "Ms. Cunningham, you authorized a company to dump several tons of gravel on Mr. Kramer's driveway while he was recovering from surgery, claiming HOA authority to do so. Is that correct?" David Chen stood up. "Your Honor, the HOA has the authority to enforce compliance with neighborhood covenants. I asked Ms. Cunningham," Judge Morrison said sharply. "Ms. Cunningham, please answer." Patricia stood up, looking less confident now. "Yes, Your Honor. The homeowner's driveway was in violation of our standards. He refused multiple warnings to correct the issue." "What was the violation specifically?" the judge asked. Patricia hesitated. "The driveway material and color were not consistent with neighborhood aesthetics." "And did Mr. Kramer receive approval for his driveway installation from your architectural review committee?" Another hesitation. "The previous committee approved it, but that approval was given in error." Robert stood up. "Your Honor, may I present evidence?" "Please do, Mr. Fitzgerald." Robert pulled up the security camera footage on a laptop connected to the courtroom display screen. He played the entire sequence, showing Patricia directing the gravel dump. The courtroom was silent as the video played. You could hear everything Patricia said, including her instructions to make it impossible to use, and her claim that this was a sanctioned HOA action. When the video ended, Judge Morrison looked at Patricia with an expression that could freeze fire. "Ms. Cunningham, did you obtain a court order authorizing you to alter Mr. Kramer's private property?" "No, Your Honor, but as HOA president, I have the authority." "You have no such authority," Judge Morrison interrupted. "Arizona law is very clear. An HOA can fine homeowners for violations. An HOA can take homeowners to court to compel compliance. An HOA cannot unilaterally destroy or alter private property without a court order. What you did constitutes property damage and potentially criminal trespass." Patricia's face went red. "But the CC and Rs state that—" "I've read the CC and Rs, Ms. Cunningham. There is no provision granting the HOA authority to do what you did. Mr. Fitzgerald, what is your client seeking?" Robert stood again. "Your Honor, we request that the court order the HOA to immediately remove all gravel from Mr. Kramer's property at the HOA's expense and restore the driveway to its previous condition. We also request that all fines and charges assessed against Mr. Kramer be voided. Additionally, we're requesting an investigation into the HOA's finances and governance, as there are concerns about misuse of authority and potentially misappropriated funds." "Objection, Your Honor," David Chen said, standing quickly. "The financial audit request is beyond the scope of this hearing." "I'll allow it," Judge Morrison said. "If the HOA president is abusing her authority in one area, the court has an interest in ensuring she's not abusing it in others. Mr. Chen, the HOA will provide a complete financial accounting for the past 2 years to the court and to Mr. Kramer's attorney within 15 days. Patricia looked like she was going to explode. "Your Honor, our finances are confidential." "They're not confidential from homeowners, Ms. Cunningham. Arizona Revised Statute Section 33. 1258 requires HOAs to make financial records available to homeowners upon request. Consider this a court-ordered request." Judge Morrison signed the order right there in the courtroom. "The HOA had 10 days to remove all gravel from my property and restore my driveway to its original condition. All fines and charges were voided. The HOA had to produce complete financial records, and the court scheduled a follow-up hearing in 30 days to review compliance. One more thing," Judge Morrison added as we were about to leave. "Ms. Cunningham, if you or anyone acting on behalf of the HOA approaches Mr. Kramer's property for any reason other than the ordered remediation, I will hold you in contempt of court. Do you understand?" "Yes, Your Honor," Patricia said through gritted teeth. We left the courtroom feeling victorious, but Robert cautioned us. "This is just round one," he said as we stood in the courthouse hallway. "Patricia's not going to take this lying down. Be prepared for her to try something else. He was right to warn us. The HOA had 10 days to start removing the gravel. On day 9, nothing had happened. Robert filed a motion to hold the HOA in contempt. That got their attention. On day 10, a landscaping crew showed up and spent 2 days removing all the gravel. They were professional and apologetic, explaining that they'd just been hired and had no idea about the backstory. When they finished, my driveway was exposed again, but it was a mess. The heavy gravel had cracked several of the Belgian block pavers, and dirt and debris had worked its way into all the gaps. The driveway was damaged and needed repair. Robert immediately filed an amendment to our lawsuit, adding the cost of repairs. He got estimates from 3 contractors. The lowest was $8,000 to repair and restore the driveway properly. Meanwhile, the financial records started coming in, and they were fascinating. Robert had a forensic accountant review them, and what she found was explosive. In the 2 years since Patricia had become HOA president, over $60,000 in HOA funds were unaccounted for. The records showed payments to various contractors and service providers, but when Robert's investigator contacted these companies, they reported being paid much less than the records showed, or in some cases, they'd never worked for the HOA at all. Patricia had been embezzling HOA funds. The forensic accountant's report was detailed and damning. Patricia had created fake invoices, inflated real invoices, and pocketed the difference. She'd used HOA credit cards for personal expenses, claiming they were HOA business. She'd authorized payments to shell companies that didn't actually exist. Robert filed an expanded lawsuit including fraud, embezzlement, and breach of fiduciary duty. He also reported the findings to the Arizona Attorney General's office and the Scottsdale Police Department. Things moved quickly after that. The Arizona Attorney General's office opened an investigation. The Scottsdale Police Department assigned detectives to the case. The HOA's insurance company was notified, and they immediately suspended Patricia from her position as president pending the investigation. Patricia, of course, claimed she was being targeted and that all the financial records were in order. She insisted the forensic accountant was biased and that Robert was manipulating evidence. Nobody believed her. The case took several months to work through the system. During that time, I focused on recovering from my surgery, which went well. By 3 months post-surgery, I was walking without assistance and back to about 90% normal function. The neighborhood rallied behind me. It turned out Marcus was right. People had been afraid of Patricia, but they were also angry about her behavior. Several other homeowners came forward with their own stories of harassment, excessive fines, and abuse of authority. Robert ended up representing 4 other families in related lawsuits against the HOA. The HOA board held an emergency election and removed Patricia permanently. They installed a new president, a retired accountant named George Harrison, who immediately began implementing reforms and transparency measures. The criminal case against Patricia took about 6 months to build. The Attorney General's office charged her with theft, fraud, and embezzlement. The evidence was overwhelming. Between the security camera footage showing her authorizing property damage, the financial records showing embezzlement, and testimony from multiple homeowners, she had no defense. Patricia's lawyer tried to negotiate a plea deal, but the prosecution wasn't interested. This had become a high-profile case about HOA abuse of power, and they wanted to make an example. The trial lasted 2 weeks. I attended every day, watching from the gallery as prosecutors systematically dismantled Patricia's claims of innocence. The turning point came when the prosecution played the security camera footage in court. Seeing Patricia's smug expression as she directed tons of gravel to be dumped on my driveway while I was recovering from surgery apparently didn't sit well with the jury. They convicted her on all counts. Sentencing came a month later. Judge Morrison, who had presided over the original injunction hearing, also handled the criminal sentencing. She was not sympathetic. "Ms. Cunningham, you abused a position of trust to enrich yourself and harass homeowners who disagreed with you," Judge Morrison said. "You showed no remorse and no understanding that your actions were wrong. The court sentences you to 4 years in prison, followed by 3 years of probation. You will also pay full restitution to the HOA and to all affected homeowners." Patricia broke down crying as they led her out of the courtroom in handcuffs. I felt no sympathy. She'd had multiple opportunities to do the right thing and had chosen to double down on her bad behavior every time. The civil lawsuits took a bit longer to resolve, but the outcomes were favorable. The HOA's insurance company settled my lawsuit for $75,000, covering the driveway repairs, property damage, emotional distress, and attorney fees. The other homeowners Robert represented also received settlements. The forensic accountant's final report identified $83,000 in embezzled funds. Patricia was ordered to pay it all back as part of her restitution, along with damages to the individual homeowners she'd harassed. Her house in Desert Palms Estates was sold to help cover the restitution, and she lost everything. The HOA underwent major reforms. George Harrison and the new board implemented policies requiring multiple board members to approve any expenditure over $500, quarterly financial audits, and strict limits on what violations could be enforced and how. They also amended the CC&Rs to explicitly state that the HOA had no authority to alter homeowners' private property without a court order. My driveway was completely repaired and actually looked better than before. The contractor used the insurance settlement to replace all the damaged pavers and reseal everything. I also upgraded my security camera system with 2 additional cameras, though honestly, I hoped I'd never need that footage for anything more than checking package deliveries. About a year after the whole ordeal ended, I was outside watering my front lawn when Marcus walked over. "Keith, I wanted to thank you," he said. "For what?" "For standing up to Patricia, for not just paying her fake fines and moving on. Because you fought back, she's in prison, the HOA is actually functional now, and the neighborhood is so much better." "I had good evidence," I said, gesturing to the security cameras, "and a good lawyer." "You also had guts. A lot of people would have just taken the loss." Marcus was right in a way. It would have been easier to pay the fines, rip out my $30,000 driveway, and install whatever Patricia wanted. But that would have been wrong. It would have validated her abuse of power and encouraged her to do worse to other people. Fighting back had been the right choice, even though it took over a year to fully resolve and required going through the stress of lawsuits and criminal trials. Some battles are worth fighting, especially when you have truth and evidence on your side. Teresa and I celebrated the 1-year anniversary of the gravel incident with a barbecue in our backyard. We invited all the neighbors who had supported us, including Marcus and the other families Robert had represented. George Harrison, the new HOA president, even stopped by with a fruit basket and an apology on behalf of the HOA. "I know it doesn't undo what Patricia did," George said, "but the new board wants you to know that we're committed to making sure nothing like this ever happens again." "I appreciate that," I told him. "And honestly, the HOA's been great since you took over. No complaints." "That's the goal," George said. "An HOA should make the neighborhood better, not make homeowners' lives miserable." That evening, as the sun set over the Arizona desert and our neighbors mingled in the backyard, I stood on my fully repaired driveway and thought about everything that had happened. My knee had healed completely. My driveway looked amazing. Patricia was in prison where she belonged. The HOA was functional and reasonable again. And I'd learned that having good security cameras and a willingness to fight for what's right could make all the difference. Teresa came out to join me, handing me a beer. "What are you thinking about?" she asked. "Just reflecting on how crazy this year has been," I said. "Waking up from surgery to find my driveway buried in gravel was probably the worst surprise of my life, but in a weird way, I'm glad it happened." "Really?" "Patricia was going to keep abusing her power until someone stopped her. If it hadn't been me, it would have been someone else, maybe someone without camera footage or the resources to fight back. At least we had the evidence and the means to take her down." "You know what the best part is?" Teresa said, leaning against me. "What's that?" "Every time Patricia sits in her prison cell, she probably thinks about how she got caught because of your security cameras. All she had to do was leave us alone, but her ego and need for control destroyed her life." I thought about that and smiled. Teresa was right. Patricia's downfall was entirely self-inflicted. If she'd just accepted that I had approval for my driveway and moved on, none of this would have happened. Instead, her need to dominate and control had led her to commit crimes that sent her to prison. The party continued into the evening, and I found myself telling the story of the gravel incident multiple times to neighbors who wanted to hear the details firsthand. Each time I told it, I emphasized the importance of documentation and standing up to bullies, even when they hide behind official titles. One of the younger couples, newlyweds who'd just bought a house in the neighborhood, listened with wide eyes. "That's terrifying," the wife said. "How do you prevent something like that from happening?" "Security cameras," I said immediately. "Invest in a good system. It doesn't have to be expensive, but make sure it covers your property and records audio. Also, know your rights. Read your HOA's CC and Rs and understand what they can and cannot do. And if you think your HOA is overstepping, don't be afraid to consult a lawyer early." "Robert Fitzgerald?" the husband asked. "Or someone like him," I said. "Having a lawyer who specializes in HOA law makes a huge difference. They know the statutes, they know the typical tricks HOAs try to pull, and they know how to fight back effectively." As the evening wound down and our guests left, Teresa and I cleaned up the backyard together. My knee felt strong and stable, with no pain or limitation. The surgery had been successful, and the physical therapy had paid off. It was ironic that the thing I'd been most worried about, the knee surgery and recovery, had turned out fine, while the thing I never anticipated, an HOA president burying my driveway in gravel, had been the real challenge. The next morning, I was drinking coffee on our front porch when a car I didn't recognize pulled up. A woman in her 30s got out and walked up to me. "Are you Keith Kramer?" she asked. "That's he." "That's me. Can I help you?" "My name is Jennifer Morris. I'm a reporter with the Arizona Republic. I've been following your case with Patricia Cunningham and the HOA. I'm doing a piece on HOA abuse of power in Arizona, and I'd love to interview you if you're willing." I hadn't expected media attention, but I agreed. We did the interview right there on my front porch, with my Belgian block driveway visible in the background. I told her the whole story, from the initial dispute over the driveway color to finding it buried in gravel to the criminal trial and Patricia's conviction. Jennifer took photos of the driveway and asked if she could use some of the security camera footage. I checked with Robert first, and since the criminal case was over and Patricia had been convicted, he said it was fine. I provided Jennifer with a copy of the footage showing Patricia directing the gravel dump. The article came out 2 weeks later on the front page of the Arizona Republic's local section. The headline read, "HOA President Sentenced to Prison for Embezzlement and Property Destruction. Security Cameras Catch Abuse of Power." The article was detailed and fair, presenting all the facts and including comments from other homeowners Patricia had targeted. It also included quotes from the Arizona Attorney General's office about the importance of HOA oversight and homeowner rights. The article sparked a much larger conversation about HOA governance in Arizona. State legislators introduced a bill to strengthen homeowner protections and increase transparency requirements for HOAs. The bill required HOAs to maintain easily accessible financial records, limited the fines they could impose, and created a formal complaint process for homeowners who believed their HOA was abusing its authority. I was invited to testify before a state legislative committee considering the bill. It was surreal, sitting in the Arizona state capitol, telling my story to lawmakers who were taking notes and asking questions. "Mr. Kramer, what would you say to other homeowners facing similar situations?" one legislator asked. "Document everything," I said. "Get security cameras, save every email and letter, and don't be intimidated. HOAs have power, but it's not unlimited. Arizona law protects homeowners, but you have to be willing to stand up for your rights. And if your HOA is breaking the law, report it to the authorities. Patricia Cunningham got away with her behavior for years because people were afraid to challenge her. Don't let fear stop you from doing what's right." The bill passed 6 months later with overwhelming bipartisan support. It became known informally as the Kramer Act, though officially it was just an amendment to Arizona's HOA statutes. I was invited to the signing ceremony where the governor specifically mentioned my case as an example of why the reforms were necessary. Back in Desert Palms Estates, life returned to normal. The new HOA board was competent and reasonable. They focused on actual community maintenance and improvement projects, rather than harassing homeowners over petty violations. The neighborhood felt more like a community than it had in years. George Harrison, the new HOA president, implemented a monthly newsletter highlighting what the HOA was working on and providing transparent financial updates. HOA fees actually decreased slightly because there was no longer embezzlement draining the accounts. Reserves were being properly maintained, and the neighborhood's common areas were better maintained than ever. I received occasional emails and calls from homeowners in other neighborhoods facing similar issues. Word had spread through HOA reform circles that I'd successfully fought back against an abusive HOA president, and people wanted advice. I always told them the same thing: document everything, know your rights, get a good lawyer, and don't back down if you're in the right. One particularly memorable call came from a homeowner in Tucson whose HOA president had tried to fine him $5,000 for painting his house a shade of beige that was allegedly not on the approved color list, even though he'd gotten written approval before painting. "Did you keep the written approval?" I asked. "Yes, and I have emails confirming it too." "Then you're in good shape. Contact Robert Fitzgerald or someone like him. With documentation, cases like this are usually straightforward." The Tucson homeowner took my advice, hired an HOA attorney, and his case was resolved in his favor within 3 months. He called to thank me and said his HOA board president quietly resigned after the lawsuit was filed. My own life continued moving forward. My knee was fully healed, and I'd returned to playing recreational basketball on weekends. Teresa got a promotion at work. We took a vacation to Hawaii to celebrate everything being finally resolved. Standing on a beach in Maui watching the sunset, Teresa turned to me and said, "You know what's funny? If Patricia had just left us alone, she'd still be HOA president, still embezzling money, still making people miserable. Instead, she's in prison, you're a minor celebrity, and Arizona law got reformed, all because she couldn't handle someone having a driveway she didn't like." "Pride comes before a fall," I said. Patricia's ego couldn't accept that I wouldn't bow down to her. That need for control and dominance destroyed her. "Do you ever feel bad for her?" I thought about it honestly. No, she had so many chances to do the right thing. After the court ordered her to remove the gravel, she could have apologized, resigned, and moved on with her life. Instead, she doubled down, kept lying, and kept trying to intimidate people. She made her choices, and she's facing the consequences. We returned from Hawaii to find that the neighborhood had installed a small plaque at the community entrance. It read, "Desert Palms Estates, a community of respect, transparency, and accountability." George Harrison told me it was his idea, approved by the new board. "We wanted something to remind everyone, including future board members, about what kind of community we're supposed to be," he explained. "After everything that happened with Patricia, we don't ever want to go back to that kind of environment." I appreciated the gesture. It was a small thing, but symbols matter. 2 years after the gravel incident, I received a letter from the Arizona Department of Corrections. Patricia Cunningham was up for early release after serving half her sentence, and as a victim in her case, I had the right to submit a statement to the parole board. I discussed it with Teresa and Robert. Robert advised me that my statement could be influential, but that I should only submit one if I felt comfortable doing so. I decided to write a statement. I kept it factual and focused on Patricia's actions and their impact. Patricia Cunningham abused her position of authority to enrich herself and harass homeowners who disagreed with her, I wrote. She showed no remorse during her trial and took no responsibility for her actions. While I believe in rehabilitation and second chances, I also believe that consequences matter. Patricia should serve her full sentence as a reminder that abuse of power will not be tolerated. The parole board denied Patricia's early release. She would serve the full 4 years. I didn't take pleasure in that outcome, but I didn't feel guilty about it either. Patricia had made choices, and those choices had consequences. If she'd shown genuine remorse or taken responsibility for what she'd done, maybe I would have felt differently. But even in her parole application, she'd blamed others and portrayed herself as a victim of a conspiracy. Life in Desert Palms Estates continued peacefully. The HOA functioned as it should, maintaining common areas, organizing community events, and handling legitimate issues without harassment or overreach. Property values in the neighborhood increased, partially because word got out that the HOA was well managed and fair. My Belgian block driveway remained perfect. a testament to quality work and the principle of standing up for what's right. Every time I pulled into my driveway, I remembered the morning I'd looked out the window to see it buried in gravel. It felt like a lifetime ago, even though it had only been a few years. The security cameras continued recording, though I rarely needed to review the footage for anything more serious than figuring out when a package was delivered. Still, I kept the system maintained and up to date. It had proven its worth beyond any doubt. One afternoon, I was washing my car in the driveway when a car pulled up and a young couple got out. They approached hesitantly. "Excuse me, are you Keith Kramer?" the man asked. "That's me." "We're thinking about buying a house in this neighborhood," the woman said. "We read about what happened with the old HOA president, and we wanted to ask you directly, is this a good place to live now?" I smiled. "It's a great place to live. The HOA is well run, the neighbors are friendly, and the neighborhood is beautiful. What happened with Patricia Cunningham was an aberration, and the community came together to fix it. You'd be happy here." They thanked me and drove off to look at houses. I hoped they'd decide to buy here. New families with fresh energy were always good for a community. That evening, I sat on my front porch as the sun set over the Arizona desert. The sky turned brilliant shades of orange and purple, reflecting off the mountains in the distance. My driveway gleamed in the fading light, the Belgian block pavers perfectly arranged and maintained. Teresa joined me with 2 glasses of iced tea. "Beautiful evening," she said. "It is," I agreed. "You know, I was thinking about everything that happened," Teresa said, "with Patricia and the HOA and the trial and all of it, and I realized something." "What's that?" "You could have given up at any point. After the surgery, when you were in pain and vulnerable, you could have just paid the fines and moved on. During the lawsuit, when it dragged on for months, you could have settled for less. But you didn't. You saw it through to the end. And because of that, Patricia's in prison, the HOA is better, Arizona law is better, and other homeowners have been helped. That took courage." "I had help," I said. "You, Robert, the neighbors, the evidence from the cameras. I couldn't have done it alone." "But you had to be willing to fight," Teresa insisted. "That was the key. So many people aren't willing to fight, even when they're right, because it's hard and stressful and uncertain. You fought anyway." I thought about that. She was right in a way. Fighting Patricia and the HOA had been hard. There were times during the lawsuit when I'd wondered if it was worth the stress and uncertainty. But looking back, I was glad I'd done it. Not just for myself, but for all the other homeowners who'd been victims of Patricia's abuse, and for future homeowners who would benefit from the reforms we'd helped create. "Sometimes you have to fight," I said finally, "not because you want to, but because it's necessary. Patricia needed to be stopped, and I was in a position to do it. I had the evidence, the resources, and the willingness. Not everyone has all 3. "Which is why what you did mattered," Teresa said. We sat in comfortable silence, watching the stars emerge as the sky darkened. The neighborhood was quiet except for the occasional sound of children playing or someone mowing their lawn. It was peaceful, normal, exactly what a neighborhood should be. Inside the house, my security system continued recording, storing footage to the cloud, ready if ever needed again. But I hoped those days were behind us. One fight with an abusive HOA president was enough for a lifetime. As I finished my iced tea and prepared to head inside, I took one last look at my driveway. It had cost me $30,000 to install, thousands more to repair after Patricia's attack, and over a year of legal battles to defend. But it was mine, on my property, and no one had the right to destroy it. That principle, simple as it was, had been worth fighting for. Property rights matter. The rule of law matters. Standing up to bullies matters. And sometimes having good security cameras matters most of all. I went inside, set the alarm, and settled in for the evening. Life was good. The neighborhood was good. And my driveway had never looked better.